Welcome to Boston Originals and to the outset of our spring 2018 season, unofficially known as Christina's 10th anniversary as a Bostonian. Whoa. I have to admit that when I first arrived here, you can come in, sorry. You can come on in. There's some seats over here. When I first arrived here, I could only hear the ominous mantra of stone, stone, at the end of the word Bostonian. As an outsider, the Boston poetry community felt hard and unyielding, just a wee bit claustrophobic, homogeneous, even at times, dare I say, self-satisfied. But I've come to the understanding of how immense and morphic, even volcanic and shifting, the stone at the core of Bostonian actually is, and constituted of so many diverse and convergent trajectories and a range of contemplative and urgent temporalities and personalities and idiosyncratic co-emergent ideas, movements, and minds. I've also come to respect the powerful and in no way temporary or touristic impact that graduate students have on the fabric of our community, infusing it and fomenting it as they pass swiftly or gradually, incurring increasing amounts of debt through their studies. Two such fomenters will be reading for us tonight. The word zip code, as many of you may know, is a contemporary invention, circa 1963. Zip standing for, I swear I didn't know this myself, Zone Improvement Plan. Tonight, we are going to be ungerrymandering our literary zip code and expanding the Apollinarian zone of Boston Originals westward to include Peter Gizzi, a Massachusetts taxpayer, I should say, recentering ourselves more locally to celebrate the work of three Cambridge, Somerville mystics, experimentalists, indefatigable activists, Kythe Heller, Kevin McLellan, and Jackie Wang, and extending that parentheses yet again into eternity to honor our dearly departed friend, Gerrit Lansing, who passed away about a week ago. And I'm going to take a moment before we begin this reading to invite Jim Dunn and Fanny Howe to share some sounds and maybe a moment of silence in honor of Gerrit, and then we'll get started. Jim and Fanny. How many of you knew Gerrit or of him? Okay, that's good. And for those who don't, this will be a moment to meet him.
I think we're each just going to read a little tiny bit of his work, like one little stanza from me, because he was such a crucial spirit, literally a living spirit in Boston, and to the whole surround and how we managed to stay upright. So this is a little poem from a book that he did with Bill Corbett at Pressed Wafer, and about February, where we stand now. Despite fatigue and foliage fall, extends a grace of quietude, reclaims and constellates your death to wring from me the wrongest cry, kelson of transmembered diamond night.
When I think of Gerrit, I think of the lightness of his being and also the deep richness of his intellect. And I think of water, and I think of honey and a rock, and this is perfect. His poems meet you at a very human level, but there's so much going on. And he was such a huge spirit. Friends of this room, friends of Christina, and a graduate of this fine university. And this is Honey from the Rock. My love must hold to fluency, as a statue, fable. Rock of what imprints us in the shakes of being where we are. Hold to the shifts of light. Hold to the spring and heap of water brings it in. Junk of night and flowers takes it out. Sweet flag of dawn, our integrities are all the inroads we can make. They're poles. Life sucks itself to life in Granny's day swamp, as I wait for you and you for me, and bullfrog music environs common spring. Rain fills pools. I cannot declare my love, but it holds to fluency, as I imagine holding you. Thank you. Oh, and Robert Kelly, someone said about Gerrit, of his contemporaries, the most learned and the most fun. And he was really the most learned and most fun.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
There'll be a memorial service for Gerrit on Saturday night at Hammond Castle.
Yeah, Saturday, and then Sunday there's a reading
And
at
it's-
the Union Church.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to get started with our Boston Originals reading. The first reading is going to be Peter Gizzi. The second one is Kythe Heller. The third one is Kevin McLellan. And the fourth one is Jackie Wang. So they'll read in that order. Welcome. Thanks, Peter.
That's great, I'd love to. Thank you, Christina,
Sure.
for having us and for expanding the zip code. We should go as far as the Berkshires, which is where I'm from. So I was going to begin with an early poem. I was hoping that my friend Fanny Howe would be here, and she is. And this is called Beginning with a Phrase from Simone Weil. And Fanny introduced me to Simone Weil when I was in my early 20s. Beginning with a phrase from Simone Weil. There is no better time than the present when we have lost everything. It doesn't mean rain falling at a certain declension at a variable speed is without purpose or design. The present everything is lost in time. According to laws of physics, things shift when we lose sight of a present, when there is no more everything, no more presence in everything loved. In the expanding model, things slowly drift, and everything better than the present is lost in no time. A day mulches according to gravity, and the sow bug marches, gone. The hinge cracks, the gate swings a breeze contingent upon a grace opening to air, velocity tied to winging clay, every anything in its peculiar station. The sun brightens as it bleaches, fades the spectral value in everything seen, and chaos is no better model when we come adrift, when we have lost a presence, when there is no more everything, no more presence in everything loved, losing anything to the present. I heard a fly buzz. I heard revealed nature, cars in the street and the garbage footprints of a world, every fly a perpetual window, unalloyed life, gling, pinnacles of tar. There is no better everything than loss when we have time, no lack in the present better than everything. In this expanding model, rain falls. According to laws of physics, things shift, and everything better than the present is gone in no time. A certain declension, a variable speed. Is there no better presence than loss? A grace opening to air, no better time than the present. I was thinking of those remarkable children at Parkland and their advocacy. Sentences in a synapse field. For I wanted sound to dig into sound, for snow and blood, for wine and mirrors, for electrons and electricity, for debris, for damaged art, our collective fortune, future. For as long as there have been soldiers, there have been poets. For as long as poets, there has been a bridge. For I wanted to hold a room in silence, for debris flooding back into a wave. For as long as particles a charge, for it should be incredulity to be alive for these things that can be told until mystery becomes elegy. For it was March going into April, for the day was speaking the day, for what you thought, for what you buried, for who you are. You can all hear me? Surround sound. This is a little gnarlier. When orbital proximity feels creepy. Right now, there are teenage microwaves screaming through your body while you are having text with me. This is the moment I'll need you to sing with me. I'm making my way in some dark room looking for other structures to love. From the left, something speaking. I can't identify. The floor goes unfixed and moving, and this doesn't happen only at night, but during the day when I don't want to think on it. That I saw a blood orange ball caught out my window, that I'm listening to light, and it said time. I'm listening to time. It says, ha, you need to be howling at bloody torn space, need to be spooked out of your hidey hole and its glowing mess. But I love this ball I'm riding on, the strange hunk of metal and rock whizzing around my loves and my loving, the fact I spin, and it spins, and everything is spinning close up. From far away, it's so cool. I guess they call this physics, or they call it laws. If they're so well made, why do we suffer? I thought the day was opening, but now I see it's already gone. Outside, the cruel dove has a broken window. The day isn't friendly. Who are you to me? A way to understand the floor that holds me up and leaves me standing. I don't know where to go, me, Tuesday at 5 p.m. What does it mean to be in a room, any room? The wind banging against the clapboard. I know enough to see the cracked pane isn't going to be fixed any time soon. Who has time for such things in the song? Breaking, blooming, the wobble of light on wood grain late in the day, in the loneliness of orange, in the loveliness of orange. Release the darkness to new lichen. But I found a way to say no to the wood in my house. It kept creaking, wouldn't stop talking. I found a way to say no. I need to be standing in the warmth of the wood that the sun made. I need to find myself dissolving, otherwise it is all, otherwise I'm lost. Did I say that? I saw the frill of light today walking on the path. Could you hear the stirring in the wood, pine needles in the branches? Was it wind or a creature? Am I here or is it over? This was the first day, the nothing day in the nothing year. It gave me courage. It gave hints of blue, clouds electrical and dancing. It gave me rays I've never seen, shooting down, touching things. This was the first day. Here's a poem that takes its title from an Emily Dickinson, the first line of a poem, "This world is not conclusion." I actually wrote this poem in her bedroom. That's a very strange, I won't go into the story, but at any rate, this world is not conclusion. When I look out your window, I see another window. I see a wedding in my brain, a stylus and a groove, a voice waving there. When I look out your window, I see another window. These trees are not real. They grow out of air. They fell like dust. They fell. So singing is seeing, and vision is music. I saw diadems and crowns, daisies and bees, ribbons, robins, and discs of snow, sprung effects, and pencil light. When I look out your window, I see another window. I see a fire and a girl, crimson hair and hazel eyes, a public in the sky. When the world comes back, it will be recorded sound. That cooing shrub will be known as Dickinson. The syllabic, fricative, percussive, emphatic will tear open out your window. I see another window. I see a funeral in the air. I see alabaster space. I read circumference there. Little poem. Rainy days and Mondays. Over the all this and under the all that, between this yes and that yes, hauntedness, between the girl and arrows, the long ago and far away, between galaxy and litter, talking to myself, for now, a song. wind instrument. There were markets, used bookstores, trellises, and brick. These were the words I could see, thinking of the body. It's strange here, all the names in me, the gain and its foliage. In my last rotation, it was hard to tune in. The dial was faulty, the static lovely. It spoke to me through a grubby transom. Was that a cathedral bell or the air conditioner, crisp air coming in? Looking out the frame, I studied grass, so many pages blank. It's hard to look that close. I watched from a high window while I slept. Strangeness becomes you. The old language is the old language. It don't mean shit. It's not where you begin. It's how you finish. Everyone's got beer muscles when they're young. Try as you must, break as you will. Solo in space, clinging to space. Fuck, the air said, passing a corner, a long, ropey snot hitting a gutter. To know something and fail. Why discount it? The onslaught of eyes beneath a fuck you sky. The syntax breaks down its mangled draft and says, one day the poor will have nothing to eat but the rich. I hate that when syntax connects me to the rich. It's kind of funny. Hang on, I'm almost done. I don't need that piece of paper or that.
They're inaugurating our Bookstone style.
What was I going to read? All right. I'm going to read a couple of poems from poems that I wrote last summer. This came out in a little book called New Poems. This really lovely guy, John Beecham, who does it, The Brother in Elysium, is his press. I'm grateful for this really handsome edition. The present is constant elegy. Those years when I was alive, I lived the era of the fast car. There were silhouettes in gold and royal blue, a half-light in tire marks across a field, times when the hollyhocks spoke. There were weeds and a hopescape as in a painted backdrop there is also a face. And then I found myself when the poem wanted me in pain, writing this. The sky was always there but useless, and what of the blue flocks on stage and morphing? Chance blossoms so quickly, it's a wonder we recognize anything, wanting one love to walk out of the ground. Passion comes from a difficult world. I'm sick of twilight when the light is crushed. Time unravels its string. Along the way, I discovered a voice, a sun-stroked path choked with old light, a ray already blown. Look at the world, its veil. And I'll finish with this poem. That I saw the light on Nonotuck Avenue. That every musical note is a flame, native in its own tongue. That between bread and ash there is fire. That the day swells and crests. That I found myself born into it with sirens and trucks going by out here in a poem. That there are other things that go into poems, like the pigeon, cobalt, dirty windows, sun. That I have seen skin in marble, eye in stone. That the information I carry is mostly bacterial, that I am a host, that the ghost of the text is unknown. That I live near an Air Force base and the sound in the sky is death. That sound, like old poetry, can kill us. That there are small things in the poem, paper clips, gauze, tater tots, and knives, that there can also be emptiness fanning out into breakfast rolls, macadam, stars, that I am hungry, that I seek knowledge of the ancient sycamore that also lives in the valley where I live, that I call to it, that there are airships overhead, that I live alone in my head out here in a poem near a magical tree, that I saw the light on Nonotuck Avenue and heard the cry of a dove recede into a rustle, that its cry was quiet light falling into a coffin, that it altered me, that today the river is a camera obscura bending trees, that I sing this of metallic shimmer, sing the sky, the song, all of it, and wonder if I am dying, would you come back for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, bringing us. I'm going to read 3 poems, but actually I'm only going to read 2, and we'll do an experiment with the 3rd poem. And I guess I should. Hello, hello. Okay. This first poem is called A Fleur de Piel, and it's after a sculpture by Doris Salcedo. I don't know if anyone was able to see the exhibit last year at the Harvard Art Museums. Really extraordinary artist. A Fleur de Piel. Inside me, a woman is kneeling, but I do not know her. Touching and not touching the shroud of roses, she sews petal by petal on the floor. As if what our fingers touch could tell us what we have lost. How everything will be lost. You can hear her sharp keening as roses disremember into a new shape. As if what is absent in touch could speak through you. As if you remember everything that has yet to happen. And the awkwardness of the shroud, ceaselessly trying to arrange itself without the body. As if being dead were the only, as if being dead were fragile enough for what the earth had to say. Inside me, her eyes grow darker. Blackened needles, sewing a spectral garment you remember and forget. Your body gets smoky, she says silently. Gets holes in it. A country you can no longer tolerate, precarious as space and time. 2 forms of motion that cross in a desire of which the body is unappeasable metaphor. The mark a needle makes as it appears and disappears between the folds. Inside me, a woman is kneeling. Returning home after a long journey to find home no longer there. Her body sutures the dark border between Columbia and the moon, between things which enclose you and things you cannot touch. They are so near. something sobbing in her all the time, all the time. The small flame shivers and shivers in you like an eye. Climb in. Part your shattered chest like a shroud and lick at the rose petals welling over your bones. They have nothing to do with your happiness or grief. I worked at a overnight homeless shelter for kids for a couple years on the overnight shift when I lived in Portland, Oregon, and there was this one girl who was about 8 who became a good friend of mine, and she had a rare disease which made the skin on her body overheated and fevered. So she was always massaging it with lotion and always actually burning. And she's really stayed with me for many years now. This poem is in some ways about her. There were things that had happened with fire before when I could not speak. I am not sure if fire is the correct word. The first thing was the burning that was inside the girl, then completely separate from her, on its own. The second thing was a flock of skeletons, flaming birds. I was frightened, and so I stopped. There were fire marshals signaling. "This is illegal," they said. With all my strength, I prevented myself thinking the thing inside the match that wanted out. And then, because I had to, because the fire could not be prevented, I wrote this. Liquid gases, messy curls, and swollen skin. The burning girl flushed red against the rough brown of the couch. When she left, it was November, the first snow before winter. What we did was write her into the client book under open cases. Behind the runaway shelter were the other houses, intensely nondescript in the pale gray sky. Behind the girl was the fire. At the edge of the fire was a seam, a dense shedding of blood reaching the surface of her skin, a place where things previously separate moved together in a flushed permeability. I stood there not knowing what to do. Where had she gone, I thought, watching her bare footprints in the new snow. Later, her eyes were calm against her charred skin as she looked up. Above her, the fire was dense with long branches that reached thickly with colors I could not identify. In the minutes before the masked surgeons came in to operate, the girl reached up, her arms crisscrossing rapidly beneath the stainless steel. When I remembered the scene later in New York, the image of a cairn of dead birds superimposed itself on her chest, her upper body thick as a tree branch. I said it was a nest, the body a cage for curved space, the site of the pyre. Instead of hands, she had streaks of light. The lightning sky like scars on a face. Half-life stars litter the upturned cheek above the houses. Can you see it? In the mirror, all the sparks stir, a mirror, a liquid fever. Does the skin shrivel where her bare feet are too cold, making prints in the new snow? This is what a child does in a fairy tale. She leaves. She is a runaway. Her feet are heavy. Her feet are touching the snow. Her feet are reaching and reaching and reaching, going out to the tips where the color is. The fire animal's sky is orange like painted lids. If there are stars, I cannot see them. For the last one, I need your help. So maybe you can share. There are 20 copies, so maybe make friends with the person next to you. Sure. Yeah. I'll just read a brief introduction so you have a sense of where this piece is coming from. But then what I'm very much hoping, because so many of you are poets yourself, and why do you have to be silent in a reading? You know, there's no reason for it. And I thought we could make an experiment. So I'll just read an introduction to this. I found myself in conversation with a revelation text from the Nag Hammadi library, discovered in 1945, buried in a jar in the Egyptian desert, and written in the voice of a female figure who is not identifiable. A friend offered paintings for the first and last page of this conversation, entitled Permission. At the same time, thinking of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, I found myself in conversation with Michihiko Hachiya's Hiroshima diary, and in another conversation simultaneously with a friend who is undergoing the between state of medical transition from being a woman to being a man. Coincidentally, Gizzi was engaged in translating that original Coptic text of the same Nag Hammadi revelation into English. We began to collaborate by reading the revelation together aloud for several hours at a time, during which time we entered a state of trance and began to improvise lines and embody movements and gestures in and between the passages of text. Zia's voice is changing, and during the course of our readings, Zia's voice would suddenly drop and another voice or voices would enter. Our voices together became multiple, fractured, unidentifiable. Our harmonies and discords changed the voices we recognized as our own. Reading the text aloud felt vulnerable, and so we held hands as if to protect ourselves from what we were saying. We continued these recitations in public, private spaces that were also between, on a public stairway, in a cemetery, on a traffic island, in the labyrinth. I found myself in these pages confronted with an enormous chaos of thought and feeling that I couldn't bring myself to tamper with, and beside which literature was something of which I felt ashamed. So this composition, I composed it by, you can see here, collaging text that I had written myself with source material, which was sometimes distorted or changed, including a conversation with the friend I mentioned earlier. And what I'm hoping we can make an experiment of is the first section up to just part 1 until part 2. This is a piece for many voices. And so there are many voices here in this room. And I'm just going to read the title And then look at the words and see what you naturally feel drawn to say, And if you feel like saying something that's on here, then say it. We'll just read it. So anyone can speak, and if somebody else is speaking, you can still say whatever you want to speak. But I'm hoping we can read it together and see what happens. Is that okay? Okay.
In the order in which it's intended? Or?
Yeah. You mean people can speak at the same time? Yeah, people can speak at the same time. You can change your voice or the loudness or softness. I mean, it's kind of a musical intention. But you're all poets, so let's just play with the language that's here and see what happens. The thunder perfect mind.
Their lips do not move.
Guarding shadows disappear.
The view where a moment before all had been so bright and sunny, now dark and hazy.
Through swirling dust, she can barely discern a wooden column that had supported one corner of her.
She hears nothing like an explosion when not, nor remembers any sound during the walk to the hospital when houses collapse.
Walks through a gloomy, silent motion picture.
The inner feminine of her recedes.
Though simultaneously comes forward, inside the mask.
Doesn't need to hide anymore by becoming as masculine as possible.
Each time has been the honored masked or the scorned mask.
An empty secret in her, always saying, "This means nothing." The world is smaller than a stem of grass.
Excuse me, please.
What she is not.
Positive statement.
An accumulation.
A not.
A not.
All these paradoxes.
Stop in the mind.
Break it open to some other possibility.
Where who is speaking?
Who's spoken to changes.
Years.
Fire springs up and begins to spread.
She discovers.
She is completely naked.
Naked.
Gradually there are shadowy forms of people, some of them walking ghosts, others move in pain, scarecrows, arms held out from their bodies, forearms, hands dangling.
Dangling.
The shortest path to the street lies through the house next door, stumbling
Falling, running.
Running.
until in flight trip over something and fall sprawling into the street.
Sprawling.
Discover.
You tripped over a man's head.
Excuse me, please. Lips do not move.
Here's the skin not knowing yourself.
The skin of forgetting the landscape of your body.
The horizon line of crests, pale streams, hands still on the long strips of skin.
Where are my eyes?
Here is the skin where you have been.
Where the fingers of others went missing on you.
Bruise marks, bleeding.
The soles of your feet bare where the earth rushes up to lean on them, where it forces them to fall down.
The silence is you have been born into.
Then the fingers of others leave rips, lift flags of blood.
Even when they're empty.
Silent.
Fall down, get up.
Skin made of the looks of others gathers like glass spiderwebs.
Eats the fire. Casts into the fire the open eye.
where they burn into?
There's hundreds of pieces lifted up and you watch an air ash.
Drifting up.
The yellow chemical smell of the fabric. The fire like ripped up writing.
Waiting to see desire begin.
What shapes, what new forms, new letters, an elbow, one mouth.
Part of me.
Shame of me.
My person on his street from 10 to 16.
An extremely sexual, self-destructive shape, not drugs, but self-destructive sex. It was extremely dominant in everyone, so there was something about being shameless and ashamed.
It protects you from anything real about your desire by the act of humiliating yourself.
It's a self-negating, self-destructive form of survival.
I did a lot of criminal activity.
In which I felt that I could do whatever I wanted and it didn't matter, wasn't real.
Because of extreme physical abuse, my body wasn't real to me. I fled from my body, and so in doing these criminal activities in the world, I was trying to test whether or not the world was actually me.
I wasn't real.
Wasn't in my body at all, couldn't feel anything.
So rather than cut myself or commit suicide, wanted to see if anything I could do to the world would matter.
I mean, by cutting open the structure, the power I saw in the world itself.
The trees hide their eyes but watch.
A pile of ash.
By which the thunder is begun.
Speaking of location.
And the thing's still there inside you, the new thing awake, green, wearing it tight all around your skin.
Your mouth unsealed, breathing. And inside you now, inside the minutes, inside them.
Thunder.
Comes out the sky.
And speaks on earth as a disturbance.
I'm not sure.
Words are performers.
They do what they say, thus have a secret power.
Calling yourself a whore, or a holy one, encompasses and dislodges you.
I am the utterance of my name.
Thunder resonates when we
When we
speak it.
Lightning flashes through us.
These words feel like weather.
Weather.
You cannot grasp what is being said.
The eye that speaks, shifting as an
And
atmospheric.
Desire veering as the person being spoken to changes.
The person speaking and the situation changes.
Doubling.
A tripling.
Echo.
Echo.
The voice wants others to speak the voice, to inhabit it. I can say right now that I am a woman, and I am.
Embedded in my neck, a sizable fragment of glass, which I matter-of-factly dislodge.
I study it in my blood-stained hand.
Unhealing burns.
Radiation poisoning.
A strong, startling flash of light, and then another. So well does one recall little things that
Stone lantern in the garden becomes brilliantly lit, and one debates whether this light was caused by a magnesium flare or sparks from a passing.
Says I'm sure it
I'm
started
sure it
with
started.
my mother, who was beautiful when she was young. I was her favorite person everywhere, except in the world.
Says I was always smart and weird and big, and I didn't become social until much later.
Says
Simultaneously stripping away something.
That has been blocking me in order to come to something more authentic.
There's text in these words.
Sound like desire itself.
By
Like
blasting.
Social categories. There's no resting place if we're merely responding
To desire.
As soon as desire is embodied, it becomes mortal.
Constantly in flux.
Shifting.
Changing.
Desire.
overflowing.
It's a container.
Crack a fountain that keeps
Leaking.
And the noise in my head is ridiculous. I dance myself into this state, and all this time I've been dancing.
There's no color.
Because I can't see anymore.
My eyes are open,
But the music is not.
registering.
I can't hear it, but I have this sensation.
Like water flowing out
And at the same time,
allows a moment of solace.
it is a waterfall.
Thanks so much, everyone.
What a fun exercise. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Christina. I'm going to read a couple of poems from Tributary, a couple of poems from a forthcoming book called Ornithology, and mostly work that's new from December. So I'll just start. Tributary. The fire. It is a matter of time. I belong to the knives, and I must have already. My body will need to surrender, like spills around the conifers, when a lasting visitor mirrors slowness and up until now darts across my red sky. And one more poem from Tributary. It is a tribute to Jory Graham, who teach poetry classes here. Form. Always one last breath. Repeatedly, I don't know what will happen next. Repeatedly, I'm confused by words, thousands of words that all mean form. Antonyms for form. To exacerbate or to distract. To delineate or to distract. As is, and so forth, and so on. The skeletal quality of October sideways light elicits a rather be forgotten memory. A truth. My palms flush against my pelvis. Without resistance, surrender cannot be surrender. Infinity, or rather forever, is relentless and unrelenting. I can't escape this nomenclature. Bone dry light defining the unmade bed. To accept needs darkness, which is not the same as forever. We need to be careful what we ask for. Are you certain that you're okay? Empathy isn't considered a proper noun in all instances. I must remember to capitalize you. My body is a trench to fall in, to climb out of, morning light on my body. Little sample of Tributary. And here's a little sample of Ornithology, which is forthcoming from the Wordsworks, and that'll be out next month. This month. In between the leaves dropping. By the time the sound of, also my lengthening, then the height of holding my breath under the bed without dinner continues, won't rid the memory. Against my window, the aluminum ladder lengthening to the roof, then the height my father fell, and the collision of tenses. Where were you earlier still? The loss of and a toy, crossing the undertow and downriver. My brother needs me, needs the beach, piggybacking his arms around another river. I am now, but he lived, so tell me, can there be? Open the window, sound of a sigh, must find a ladder, yet the birds. a loon. A complaint and a soliloquy. Yes, an urgent message spins concentrically, not like light. And vulnerable, you measure angular differences. All the trees laying in witness these haunted yodels, as if genetics summoning ancestors became the response, as if a circle with less memory, the listening people will stop, return to their own. And then one more poem from Ornithology, which was actually written in this room. It was an exercise with Ariana Reigns. When was that? 2014. This is pretty much verbatim what I wrote of that night. What happened in the night? What happened in the triangle of night? Why this sleeplessness? Trouble is the bird unable to sleep. You are a bird. We are all birds looking for treetops, but the trees have gone missing. Also missing your siblings. They have fallen through the ice. They are underwater, looking up at the mountains. Perhaps the mountains are your parents or God, yet you don't believe. You are also now underwater. Do you believe now? Because you're becoming colder. You think I'm numb from the cold, but what comes to mind is alive now. Are you your thoughts? Are you your thoughts underwater, under ice, under time, under the mountains? Look up at your parents. What are you responsible for? Your parents? What are you responsible for? The thoughts of your parents, which might also be yours? So what was really remarkable about that night is that while I was writing this poem, I was receiving text messages from someone repeatedly. And it happened to be my mother texting me to let me know that my grandmother was very ill and essentially was drowning in her own lungs. Her lungs were, she was drowning. And so it's very sort of an important sort of personal piece for me. As is the next series of poems, which I'm going to read. I've had a very difficult start to this year medically, and without getting into specifics, I will get into specifics with the poems themselves. I'll just read them. So this is from a project called The Art of Fugue, which is an emotional response to Bach's The Art of Fugue. And it's in 20 pieces, and I'm going to be reading from the contrapuntal pieces. There's a total of 14, and I'm just going to read a selection of them. It's the last piece of music that he was working on, and I was working on this particular project before I got a cancer diagnosis, and I continued working on it after. So there's something about the information that was in the poems beforehand that I wasn't aware of. I was reading them to a friend, and she said, "Kevin, your body was talking to you. You actually knew that you were sick. You just didn't. You weren't reading. Really reading the language." So I'm going to read a selection of those, and I'll just read. They're called contrapunctus 1 or 2 or whatever. So I'll read them just by number. 1. I heard that the depth of longing is measurable, so I dig, try to leave it there to enrich the soil. Amaranth will grow as it has for centuries. On the way down the hill, I trip on a tree root, and face up into the sky I fall, look gone in the face. Recall the teacher who didn't know what to say about light, the color of margarine. The light seemed to pulse from the facade of the brick building. So instead of saying that he had nothing to say, he said nothing at all, and we all turned into notes. 4. The wind made the light and an ash tree seem as one, animated yet mortal. And then the wind ceased. I thought for a moment the statue in the park was me, not of me. He was an admirable, a name I hadn't heard before. The winter berries from afar look like perforated specks of blood on the snow, but I digress. As a child, I related more to adults, remember misinterpreting situations, or at least this is what I was told. Sometimes one needs to tell someone or something to go away. 6. The snow in the face walk brought me to a hungry white rabbit who's all eyes and safe, for now. Also, the sheet of paper with a boot print and the disfigured snowman. I am lesser from wanting you wet when you I am more. The contrast of charcoal, this lasting expression of concern on your face. Once I've taken in the bed sheets left on the line too long, my experience is that indoor snow will come. Tenuous for the obvious reasons. Yes, the sky's a place for fucking. 8. How much does sorrow influence harmony anyway? The long version doesn't need to be told, and I was told to not write poems about the heart, arrhythmic mine, or to end them with similes. The man inside listening to the man outside said, testosterone gets a bad rap, that without it one could expand and crash. I will need to rub the controlled substance on my shoulders, but back to the surgical theater, which could be an office without windows, the operating table, or was it a bed, held me during the impromptu echocardiogram. They recorded all the ways. I kept the echo at heart's length, noticed all the instruments that later would be used to not only open me, then the fluorescent lights I closed in on. 9. The snow dollops on pines and the iced over ones, but I am here. The condensation on the inside frozen to the window. The pattern, an electrocardiogram overlooking a more abstract landscape, the shape of desire. Desire also the shape of a torso between breaths. Yes, I went too far inside while outside, the river's almost fully frozen over. I remember the last time, years ago, a red fox crossed in that early AM. The night before, in sleep paralysis, a monster sucked the air out of my lungs. So the monster. 10. My imagination keeps me away from night, the slant of it. The milky light doesn't consider these notes, the feeling of a cello swelling in a bathtub. Instead, I try to eat all of the fallen snow outside. Arctic air stings my face, and my throat sore from the salt. My nose bled out into the snow back there, this succession of I belong here notes. I stare into the tablespoon reclining in the snow, think about occupying a space between dusk and dawn, and I drift. Otherwise, I'm whole, and there's logic to memory, until there isn't. The break had nothing to do with the preservation of angelic singing, though I do live inside a cello because the surgery changed my voice. Believe that strings protect me. I'm haunted by the man who axed the neck and the body continued without its head. The chicken said, fortitude has limits, so our standards need to change. In other words, those strangling tumors, which is also to say that my body's a bundle of nerves and I no longer recognize my voice. 11. This walk full of trepidation. It snowed a few inches overnight, yet the irradiating sun. My lizard brain detects the cancer. Did my lizard brain detect the cancer when, as a breached baby, I first saw light? I am not cancer, not a statue, not a cello, not a poem. There's the danger of feeling more, untethered, but the opposites also, dare I say, true. When I try to say something complicated and I don't know where my language is headed, I look up and to the left. Is this faith? When I speak now, I discern a new frequency, and different others hear me. I wonder about the ex libris tattooed man, name unknown, since my body's been reset. I say pipe dream aloud and realize it's time to take it up a notch, loosen the belt notch, take my pants off, be seen as completely vulnerable, as to not let myself be taken away. 14. My thoughts have no place to go, except more inward. I focus on the frozen channel, those I don't allow to reach me. The boat is a liar and I will not listen. Kites are also liars. Never mind, I know who I am. Male, female, and neither. I judge indecision and refusal. Long live the queen also means the king is dead. In other words, I'm a eunuch and I'm looking to the channel. Dare I say the viaduct is arrhythmic? I'd tell the engineers, but they're all too busy talking among themselves. Somewhere there's an ocean, a wellspring, and in the in-between a pulse. I talk to myself, so a thinness of skin, a galaxy of dangling lights, each bulb in a glass enclosure, yet assembled together and hanging at fixed heights. No, think from the floor upward. Consider ferns. The walls inside inform the walls outside, as if an alkaline substance coats their sensors. Consider oneself. Ask generations, the emotionality in cells. My back is to the valley because I need to be taken by surprise. Might be the only way to be reached, the alabaster core of my spiral. The indoor window faces another indoor window. I must find the pressure points because the hair of a monster sometimes appears on the back of my coat, the slope of his neck jagged like a difficult mountain pass. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to this Boston Originals series. Thank you, Christina. While you were talking, I thought of a very cheesy joke. Okay, what do you call an evil non-Bostonian? A summer villain. Which means I'm only villainous in the summer. Okay. So I'm not from Boston, but I like to think of myself as an honorary Bostonian because I go to psychoanalysis in Boston 4 days a week. So my unconscious is in Boston. And I just wanted to read one poem tonight and a page from Michael Eigen's book, Contact with the Depths. This book is, Michael Eigen is this incredible psychoanalyst who's Jewish, who practices in New York and is interested in mysticism. And he says that he, moved to California to become a beat poet, but they weren't neurotic enough in California. So he had to go back to New York and become a psychoanalyst. So he writes about mysticism and psychoanalysis, and he's just like a really funny, weird guy. But this is just an account of his relationship with his patient, Kurt. So one of the miracles of psychoanalysis is there can just be nothing for years, and then suddenly the unconscious burps, and there's like this rupture, and something comes to the surface. So this is about a breakthrough that he had with Kurt 5 years into analysis. Kurt weeping, head in hands. I feel now the way I so often felt in hospitals. No, not so often, but in my hospital stays, there came moments when I put my head against my arm, leaning against a wall, and wept, sobbed. I did not wail because I did not want to draw attention to myself, at least not so much attention that an attendant would rush over. I sobbed on the quiet side, but was noticed anyway. An orderly would come and ask why I was crying. A reasonable enough question, of course. What could I say? I told the truth, although I feared the truth was incomprehensible. Now, for the first time, I will say it as I felt it. I tried with doctors, but no one could listen it through. In my last stay, a hospital therapist interrupted me as I started to cry in her office. She asked what I was crying about, and when I began to tell her, she cut me short and wondered why I was saying such things. She seemed to feel they were, well, not real enough, too metaphysical. I was crying for the world, the whole world, all time. All the time of humanity since the beginning of human time on earth. I saw the floors and walls of the building as levels and sections of time, ages of man, from human origins through Paleolithic, Neolithic, ancient, modern, now. All ages, each in its own right, yet also compressed together as one. Humankind as one time. The separation of then and now was real, each epoch real. The separation was artificial, all one. How can it be both? In experience, it is both. I suppose in another mood I could have laughed with joy, but that is not what happened. I wept and could not stop weeping for all the pain in the universe, our universe, the universe of our lives, human life, all human lives. Maybe all feeling beings. Maybe the whole universe in its way is a feeling being. As a child, I felt rocks were alive. But I was weeping over human pain, my pain, your pain. Although I did not know you then. Pain everywhere. Time has no boundaries. All pain is one. Isn't that the meaning of Jesus? He took all the pain in the world into himself. All the pain in the world condensed to a single point that was Jesus. Like an alchemist, he transformed that pain into joy. All the pain in the universe went through an inner transformation through his being. My weeping emphasized the pain. Another moment might emphasize resurrection. A suffering unto life, life unto life. Weeping comforted me. I felt wholeness, peace in my chest, my body, my psyche. My tormented self found a moment of peace through tears for everyone. I've tried to say this before. This is the closest I can get. So that was Michael Eigen paraphrasing his patient, Kurt, who in the narrative is a documentary filmmaker, but when analysts write about their patients, they often change identifying details. So I don't even know how much of it is true. So this is a poem which is really a diary entry in verse, which is what most of my poems start as. And this is called Who Knows Why Thoughts Sometimes Lose Their Wings. What does it mean to wake with a feeling and why? Nobody knows why. Nobody knows why life was given to us. Sometimes you wade through junk self-help advice only to stumble upon curious nuggets of truth about love's closeness to death, or how love lets us glimpse the soul beneath layers of flesh. As we decay, what's there? That thing, stubbornly itself. Soul is hewn in a wild workshop. In some other world, did I volunteer for this? Like an astronaut, I volunteer, now make me born. Was I counseled by a bureaucrat of heaven? Was I an angel who came to earth on the wings of desire to be human, gasping alive every time I step out of buildings into the sun? How the exits of libraries and my psychoanalyst office became birth canals. What was that grace? Consciousness expanding and contracting, a sparrow beneath my chair. What was that moment when all life contracted to a single point of pure life? Woke up from the dream of hanging succulents with the Agnus Dei liturgy on my tongue. Jesus, Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world. Have mercy on us. When I was counseled pre-birth, did they tell me about this pain? Did I wake inside the pain-joy dialectic between babble and searing beauty? Who knows why we wake to life beneath a red umbrella, consciousness blooming, and somewhere the tree beneath which we will rest for eternity? Do you see yourself stopping to admire the roses in the setting sun? I remember desert nights listening to I Lost Something in the Hills, gliding beneath the big moon. It was not Jesus imbibing and transforming all human suffering that touched me in the liturgy, but the cry for help, the cry for mercy that is answered. It is usually not answered. On the floor of the world, a cry for mercy and only the silence of God. But from that unanswered cry, grace, just as soon as it arrives, it is gone. They put a new date on the birth of our species. We are 300,000 years old at least, but how did we come to this? Did we eat mushrooms to grow language? And how did we become bipedal? And what vestigial body parts still exist as phantoms hooked up to my neural map? And what pre-adaptation, invisible potential limbs can I control with my brain? Is it a memory of what was, or precognition of what is to come? How glorious that every form contains both what it once was and what it could be. The historian looks in one direction, the artist in the other. Between archive and horizon, we are floating on ourselves. There it was, in absolute clarity. Rinse myself of me, but now I want to sleep. Life not calm. Life was canceling itself, but we were lobsters once. My head filled with the sound. Life, and then I want to make a poem of flowers. The poem is almost over. Where did this line come from? The unconscious belting, stop the poem. You can't keep going forever. But head, soup, nowhere. An image scatters, the shards congeal. He said going through the pain was like that on the other side was clarity. I hear Michael Eigen saying, go all the way into it, push through until you reach the ecstatic. There's no retreating, you aged. Can't summon what was once so easy to feel, but I was alive and more myself when destroyed. You read, you imagine all the things you could write. Your own book on female lust, wandering, flowers, ecstasy. Life was once, and then I grew a brain, though I was still myself before I was born. Now imagine matter exploding. Now imagine this big rock growing in atmosphere. Now imagine Then the sadness breaks. Who would have thought that out of that primary matter, sadness would be born? Who would have thought we'd make a world without mercy for the afflicted, brains disfigured and reordered by toxins, war, trauma? What one has lived through, and the proverbial roll of the dice. My brother mentally impaired by an anoxic brain injury caused by a difficult birth, and the thought I could be in his place, in prison. Remember Eigen's description of Kurt's documentary about a single lost soul adrift on the planet. What consolation was there except the light? And why wake up weeping at the memory of stepping into the sun? Because in that sun I could love. And you remember stepping out of Widener Library, the way the sun set all particles alight, turning dust and pollen into glitter that fell from the trees in slow motion, or the way the highway became a snow globe on that gentle day in June when the cottonwoods released their seeds. On the bus, you imagine a single airborne cottonwood seed blowing across the length of your life. Don't you see? Nothing is more significant than anything else. I hear them cry, "Have mercy." The worms crushed on the pavement cries, "Mercy, mercy." I see the church spires from another angle. Everywhere spires of consciousness jutting out of the soil. Mercy, mercy, we sing to the transmogrification machine some call Jesus. Spires of mercy. How is it possible that 14 billion years ago a light appeared in that vast darkness? What symphony was made in that instant? A dog, a Schrödinger cat, a squirrel thrashing itself to death, all waiting to be made. Mercy, the mind quickens, the shore creeps, some dance, others nap. Tops spin, monuments are erected, complexity, tessellation, pyramids and sand dunes, 6 waves of mass extinctions, and the world growing dimmer, human consciousness wiped out. We saw, we woke up, and then the wind. What edge did we find? An emotional cliff, my heart throwing it into the sea. There was everything, and then you can see the contraction of sorrow growing ever denser until it disperses as sparrows. Is consciousness an accident of nature? How, out of the infinite range of possibilities, did the shape of the honeysuckle flower become perfectly suited to the beak of its pollinator? Errors. Why make a written language? Why use it for something as inconsequential as this, to write down what passes through my head? I wonder if the world will be sorry to one day lose me as a witness. I was not coherent, but I did my best. Why wake up weeping at the thought of the universe without a witness? Then the shift in the third movement of Gorecki's Symphony No. 3, when sorrow is released and transformed into grace. How incredible that some make symphonies before one by one the lights are extinguished and all language is lost. My memories left me. I forgot that terror. I walked across the field, weaving my way around the spires of splendor. Who was it that wrote Mabe Magukian's language is made of flowers? Oh, how quickly the branches of the deciduous tree sprout new wings. But why do my thoughts sometimes lose their wings? Why does consciousness flag, become a vacuum? It is happening. The future has already happened because it will. All I wanted was to stay awake long enough to feel that's all there is. Everything is as good as everything else. Somewhere, someone weeping. Why this total equality of mercy, even for the ones who wronged you? Who were you touching across some distance? What gift did you bring that I needed? Why weep during the film Wakefield when that awful man spoke the word mercy? Did even he deserve it? Mercy, how the word is an axe to the sea frozen inside me. Mercy, they cry, have mercy. I hear Cornel West quoting William James. Religion is a cry for help. Why cry for mercy in a merciless world? Through the pain, mercy. What capacity for sensing the other was lost when he was in a rage, then found when he looked and turned back from the path of cruelty. And in those moments, hatred turned inside out and he emerged disarmed. Wind today shows no sign of abating, and still some are crying, mercy be this good weather. Lay down your shield. Let the spires cut the wind as ghosts rush through the forest. Here in this moment, what shatters? You know that movement, a soul in flight. Someone raised the question, what if the universe is one giant feeling being? Weep for Kurt. And remember the profound equality of all things, how money distorts this fact. Release from hatred. In what ways did my wound make me merciless? Thank you.
Cecilia Bacuna and M. Norbese Philip on Friday night, so I hope you all will come. And then an oral history with Anne Waldman the following week, and on and on and on and on and on. Anyway, for now, you can commune, and thanks so much for coming.